Another scene that we have to talk about more is this like Sergio Leone Western style showdown at the gas station at the very beginning. The Montagues that roll up are so lame. They're very like bro-ish, and one of them's like bumbling, and then the Capulets show up and they're like very capable. And not that Mercutio is a Montague, but that he's like kind of part of their posse as well. But he's like seems like the only more capable person on that side.
No, Benvolio seems like he could be a little bit. I mean, he's not as
not Tybalt kind.
No, you're
like
right.
Tybalt when he shows up.
Tybalt shows up and he's kind of the alpha in that situation, if you want to use that terminology.
Welcome back, friends, to episode 375 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Baz Luhrmann's 1996 film, Romeo and Juliet, also known as William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Last week we talked about William Shakespeare's legendary play, so if you haven't already, go back and listen to that. This is a film that I had seen bits and pieces of, and I specifically remember being shown to me by like English teachers.
Really?
Maybe once or twice.
You watched this in school? That's fun.
Yeah, but it's something that I can't say I had a lot of attachment to. Mm-hmm. I was familiar with Baz Luhrmann's work, fan of some of his work.
Have we covered any of his stuff, or is this a first for us?
I think this is the first, but okay. You know, Gatsby's right there for us if we wanted it, and there's a couple others.
It's a familiar name. Like I know I hear about his movies. I think I've probably seen some others, but I'm not sure.
I think you've probably seen some.
I went into this one I didn't do any background research, so I don't know anything.
It's just an interesting project for us because it's like kind of catering very much towards like the MTV crowd of like, you know, the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, I was 11 when this movie was in the theaters, maybe 12. It would have been that era for me. I'm pretty sure I tried to watch this later when it came like out on rental, so maybe I was 13. From watching it this time, I'm pretty sure I didn't ever watch the entire movie. I think I probably watched parts of it and kind of bounced off of it and then just gave up. One thing I do know is that this was one of my first exposures to Shakespeare's like language at all, was this movie. And I think it was completely disorienting for me as a kid. And like, I didn't get it. I didn't get why they were talking like that. I didn't understand it. Like I felt like there was a promise made by some of the trailers that this was going to be a little bit more of like an action movie than it ended up being. Wasn't the kind of movie even I thought it was going to be. You know, I was very young, but I remember bouncing off of this and had very little other memories of this movie until watching it this time.
You know, this is early Leonardo DiCaprio. Baz Luhrmann is like really, this is his second film. What an absolutely bizarre and unique sort of tone, and like it's so eccentric, it's so uniquely his own, and like Baz Luhrmann really is like at this point between like the way that he infuses music in his work and the look of it and the costuming, the fashion of it all, he's really crafted his own style, and he is one of these auteur filmmakers working today where he really controls a lot of the vision of the film from top to bottom.
Yeah. I wanted to say thank you to the patrons who chose this. This is our quarterly selection, our first one of the year. Voted on by the patrons. I think it like narrowly won the poll against I think Perfect Blue was the other one it was against.
Yeah. Satoshi Kon's film, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, this has been a cool one to revisit. One I probably wouldn't have prioritized, but it's cool to kind of get forced into doing stuff every now and then that ends up working out well. One of the reasons we talked about last week is that I'm actually going to be on a panel about Shakespearean adaptations at NorwestCon, which, if you haven't heard from our last episode, James and I are attending. We are going to be on programming. It's April 2nd through the 5th, I believe, in SeaTac outside Seattle. And one of the big things we're doing there is interviewing the author T. Kingfisher about her novel, What Moves the Dead. And we'll be talking with her about retellings, because it's kind of a retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher. And we'll be talking with her about adaptations and that sort of thing. It's like our second ever live show. So I'm very excited for that.
Hopefully, if any of you are listening and would like to be there, come check it out. We'll be on other paneling as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll announce more of that.
Yeah, I'll be sharing all of our schedules on the Ink to Film social media accounts soon.
And also, like you said, thank you to the patrons for recommending this be our project for this quarter. I didn't remember there being so much guns in this film in such a bombastic, ridiculous way.
See,
like the guns are being...
That was in the trailer. That was like one of the big trailer selling points, was like, this is going to be like a crazy gunplay movie.
And it seemed like the beginning of it makes you think it might be.
Yeah.
Those weren't the scenes that were kind of shown to me though. Like, the balcony scene, it's very approachable for a teacher to say, hey, you kids.
If you're teaching Romeo and Juliet, this does seem like it makes sense. The only reason I can think maybe mine didn't use it is because it was maybe too new. So maybe it hadn't like entered the public consciousness enough. Maybe they weren't watching modern films coming out at the time for Romeo and Juliet. I don't know.
But just having like Leonardo DiCaprio, like that's gonna be engaging to an audience. Claire Danes, Leonardo DiCaprio, they have chemistry on screen, and it's like putting something in front of students that's gonna like make them engage in a different way.
Yeah.
And especially with the way that the lines are being delivered, because this is like Shakespearean English that they're speaking throughout, and that's something that if I hadn't just read it, I would find to be very hard to grasp onto. Although, as I said last week, as you read Shakespeare, like or at least this is my experience, as I'm reading any of his plays, it sort of starts to come more fluidly. That's how I felt about the film at first. I was like, all right, I really got to pay attention to what they're saying because it's very fast dialogue in kind of a dialect that I'm not accustomed to in the way that they're talking.
Yeah.
But once you kind of give yourself over to it, it does sort of like become more natural.
Absolutely. And I think I said this on our Macbeth coverage. It is so much better to me to be able to watch a movie like this with subtitles on than without. It really helps with the language, because it's one thing hearing it, but like trying to process it quickly for me is a struggle to be able to interpret meaning and then also make sure I'm still paying attention to what's happening on screen, and just having the text at the bottom just really helps with that. If you don't know, it is deploying Shakespearean language throughout, outside of a couple moments where characters either sing along to or quote songs. I believe every line of dialogue is Shakespearean in nature. I think there's a couple times where they might pull in lines from other plays. I didn't research this, but I just noted a couple. I'm like, I don't think that's from Romeo and Juliet. I think that's from something else. I think they add a little repetition at one point, and some stuff like that. But like they're being really strict about it. All of that is in a movie that is this like bombastic, colorful, audacious version of a like surreal Verona beach that, like you said, is trying to appeal to like kind of like the teenager crowd of the time, but also it's just so stylized and over the top. And everything's really stagey, and like the violence even is stagey, and that was one of the things that I think I was a little confused by as a kid. So you see all these guns and stuff, and you think you're gonna have this like action heavy movie, and instead even the little bit of like sort of violence that plays out tends to be very stagey and like, oh, I've been wounded, I'm gonna fall over now, and you don't really ever like see anything, and they don't really have feel like they need to show. It's not that I'm calling for gore, but there's just a difference between that like almost nothing. Like you might see a little bit of red on someone's skin sometime, and that's it. It was like very minimal.
Well, and I can understand somebody who's expecting one thing and getting something else, that like obviously being jarring, but like there was an intention in doing all that,
and
right?
I agree. Like I think now I can recognize that that's the intention of this movie. So all of that is to say that's what this movie is, and like knowing that going in helps. I think having recently read the play helped. And then going in and watching it, I enjoyed myself. I remember thinking, like, this movie has cult classic written all over it. Like, the people who are going to love this kind of bold, strange adaptation are going to really love it. And it's probably going to be something that people really cling to.
Not to mention if people who saw it as it was coming out and hitting so squarely at that time period, because it kind of uses a lot of popular music of the time period.
Well, and Leo was a young heartthrob of the era, right? I remember that was a big deal. Yeah.
The leads are just like so like you look at young Leo and you're like, that is what Romeo looks like in the imagination of all the readers of Romeo and Juliet. Same thing with Claire Danes as Juliet. Like they really fit visually those characters. And so just that, I mean, I'll talk about this too, the pacing of this film and like the kinetic energy that's in this film.
Yeah, really fast, kind of frenetic.
The editing, the camera work, there's like smash zooms and whip pans and like everything like that was screaming like action, attention, it's all in your face. And I was thinking about this like midway through the film. If you just pitched me this on paper, I would have told you like this shouldn't work.
Yeah.
It really shouldn't, because it's like it sounds like so much insane stuff going on, and just this idea that like anybody's gonna latch onto like full Shakespearean performances in like a 90s kind of like mafia gangland thing. Like
it almost felt like, I don't know, like Venice Beach or something, or like Southern California. It's just very bright and just really rich, kind of oversaturated colors everywhere. Some of the like news coverage you see reminded me of like a Bad Boys or something, which would have been, maybe this might have predated it, but like it just reminded me a little bit of like how certain action films were portrayed.
It's also like kind of, you're talking about Southern California. It made me think about like news coverage of gang activity in the 90s, and like the way that those things were being covered, and it seemed like, so far away to the public that was,
But you also have to add a level of intense camp to that.
Yes.
Because all of that seems like it would be kind of like gritty, and it's not. Mm-hmm. Like these characters are kind of flamboyant. They are behaving in a very stage-like manner, but then also they moved away from like hyper-masculine stereotypes that you would actually encounter in sort of gangland places. Like a lot of these guys are just like, I mean, think of Mercutio with his extended drag performance, and just
Mercutio is the best character in this movie. They is the most like
scene-stealing. Tybalt is great too.
Yeah,
Leguizamo. Leguizamo awesome. Kills it in this movie. He's a great Tybalt.
And the fact that they are the characters who kind of are pitted against each other, and they're like, so both of those characters are so big. They're so like filled with character, and every time they're on screen. I mean, Mercutio, like that entrance, we'll talk about it when we get there, but that entrance and the performance and like everything that goes into it, and like maybe picking up on some of what was in the text with like how Mercutio felt about Romeo and some of that.
You could tell sometimes that there's like a few lines they say, and you're like, these are the lines they use to justify this entire characterization. It's cool. So like what you were talking about though, and I don't know, this is something that I wasn't able to look into, but I'm kind of curious about. How many times had an adaptation like this been attempted? And I know it's not going to be one-to-one, but I mean just in the sense of like, let's take Shakespearean language and have the characters actually say it, and yet set it in a modern context.
I think this is it. This is the I mean, in terms of...
It has to have been done since, right? This feels like someone else has done this. I can't put my finger on it, but I feel like I've seen something like this before in another context.
I'm sure that people have done it since, and maybe people had done it before, but this is such a distinctly unique, I think, adaptation because of the way that it's blending the I think if there's a modern adaptation, it doesn't have Shakespearean English dialogue in it.
And that's different. Like we've talked about other movies like that are like they borrow the plot structure, they borrow some of the characters maybe, but they're putting modern language into their mouths, and they're not doing the direct lines, especially not throughout the entire film.
There may be some adaptations also that are very true to the source that do use the language, but probably aren't modernized and like.
Well, for sure, there's lots of those, but like this version of taking the language and just having modern characters say it, and just kind of like create an alternate universe where this is just how people talk. I'm glad someone tried this. Totally, and again, I was trying to figure out like how much credit to give him for it, but it sounds like probably good credit for it because this feels like a bold thing. It reminds me a little bit of the Psycho remake that we covered. Who was the director for that?
Gus Van Sant.
Gus Van Sant. Okay, so one of the things I said in that episode, which I don't know if it's out on the main feed or not yet, is I was like, I don't like this. I don't think this is good. But I'm glad someone tried it. It's like a cool experiment to try. I think this experiment was more successful, but also I feel the same way of like, I'm glad someone tried this. Like, I think there are a lot of things about it that make it weird and not really work 100% for me. But damned if I wasn't just kind of like enamored with the idea of trying something like this. And it's so bold and strange. And like, I think he knew, like, this is going to be a weird movie. We haven't covered the new Wuthering Heights yet. We might. Stay tuned. But one of the things that movie does is try something really bold to like generate buzz around an adaptation of like an older project that people feel like they've seen a million times and aren't going to care about. And you do that enough to generate some buzz and actually make a splashy movie. And I feel like this, I mean, I didn't look into the box office run, but my memory of it coming out was that it was a splashy enough release that I knew about it as a kid and like my friends were talking about it. And it's hard to do that when you're making a Shakespeare adaptation, right? You know what I mean? So that boldness works in some ways.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, to do it with Wuthering Heights is the same. It's the same. It's like popularizing it in a way. Like
you're taking it a little bit out of the like stuffy English classes, and I say this as someone who was an English major, so I love the stuffy English classes, but you're taking it out and you're bringing it to pop culture, and in the way of doing it, you're going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and you're going to anger a lot of people. I'm sure there are a ton of people who love Shakespeare who are very mad about this movie and hated it. I can almost guarantee that happened.
It was divisive. It was divisive at the time period, and Wuthering Heights is divisive today for what it is, and it's interesting because it's like taking these swings, popularizing, including pop music. I'm sure that Emerald Fennell was inspired by Baz Luhrmann in films like this to try to bridge that. And I heard Baz Luhrmann talking about this in his philosophy on this film specifically with Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare was trying to appeal to the high and the low demographic of art.
We've talked about this in our other times covering Shakespeare, and even when we got into Hamnet, I think it came up last week. Yeah.
And also was including popular music of the time in his plays.
Well, and his attention to comedy, which we talked about, like he tells jokes in this play. In fact, there's a lot of comedy in this play. It reads almost like one of his comedies until about the halfway point when things start going more tragic. And that mix, that blend of drama and comedy was so new at the time, and still works to this day.
And I think this film is so tongue-in-cheek in a way, and playing in that same space of like, what the tragedy is going to be. Everybody who's heard the names Romeo and Juliet knows what happens.
Yeah.
But like to have some heart, some humor, all these other elements of life along the way, and for us to get to where we do, I think like that's what Baz Luhrmann's intention was. However insane that came out in this film. And I mentioned before, like on paper this maybe shouldn't work, but I think this is a film where like it's better than it should be based on the sum of all of its parts.
Okay, yeah, I feel like I'm starting to get a sense for where you're at, and like maybe it's because I don't know if you're 100% set on your opinion. I feel a little bit unsteady too, because I'm like part of me really admired this film. There were parts I was having so much fun with. The look of it is interesting. There's a really kind of manic zaniness to it that, while at times appealed to me, at other times felt like it kind of undercut the story or detracted from it, was almost distracting too much. Some of the stuff just ended up looking kind of hokey. A few of the performances got so into that extreme stagey area that they kind of lost me. So, like, it wasn't like it was all working, Like, I feel like this idea is so cool, and if everything had worked to perfection, this would be a movie I absolutely loved. I just don't know that the execution was quite there, even though I am impressed with and liked a lot of things about it.
I think we're mostly on the same page here. I respect this film. I think that it has a lot of big swings that are to be applauded. Like, I think that this type of filmmaking, bold filmmaking, creating a style, creating a look for a film, this like sort of alternate world that this whole space is living in, it's clearly calling back to like musicals and like spaghetti westerns, and like there's so many like different things happening in this all at the same time. And then while all that's happening, it's also, the source is a play. It proceeds as a play does, basically a play put on screen, and then also just given all the elements of what film can do as a medium that maybe theater is held back by. Like, the lens can be the eye for the audience, can really move around a scene, whereas a play is just playing out before you, and you are obviously there with your own perspective. As we talk about more about Baz Luhrmann, I'll be interested to hear if you've seen his other films. I think knowing his style from if you saw The Great Gatsby, that Leonardo DiCaprio collaborated with him on again.
Didn't.
He came back for that. Okay, so we should talk about that at some point too. That'd be a fun one to cover on the podcast. And then another major one that I was probably one of my first encounters with Baz Luhrmann's style was Moulin Rouge.
Okay, I think I've seen Moulin Rouge. It was another one that came out a long time ago. I've definitely seen parts of it. Whether or not I've seen the whole movie, I'm not sure.
I think that one is him kind of refining some of what I see in this film. And really like that, I don't know. I think that's an incredibly fun film, and I see a lot of the DNA of that in this film.
Did he do the new like Elvis movie or something?
He did, yeah.
Okay.
With
so he's still making movies that are making some waves. Yeah, I mean, I have a book on creating adaptations that I've read, and one of the things that there's like whole sections about different kinds of adaptations, and there's one in there that we don't talk about as much, and that's the biopic. And you mentioning that, the Elvis biopic, it does remind me that is a form of adaptation, because you're taking true events as your blueprint, but then you're still having to craft a narrative that is going to fit in a certain time frame and is going to be compelling to an audience. And so you are still adapting. in that way,
Yeah.
even though it is very different than adapting one piece of fiction into, another, just kind of into another medium. There's a reason we don't do a ton of nonfiction on this podcast. I don't know. It's interesting, right? Like, maybe this guy has an eye for it, or it seems drawn to adaptations in different forms.
I think he really does. Some combination of that and then like performance, whether that's dancing, music,
Right.
the way that like all that coincides in film, the way that like his films are so musically connected. On The Great Gatsby, he worked with like Jay-Z and some other hip hop producers to like create
The Moulin Rouge soundtrack exploded when that came out.
Yes, yeah. Well, and let's talk about him. Let's talk about Baz Luhrmann, because we'll talk about some of his other films and how much he's involved in these other art forms. Mark Anthony Baz Luhrmann, born
what a name.
Mark Anthony Luhrmann, is an Australian film director, producer, writer, and actor whose various projects extend from film and television into opera, theater, music, and the recording industries. He is the most commercially successful Australian director, and 4 of his films are in the top 10 highest worldwide grossing Australian films ever. On the screen, he is best known for his Red Curtain trilogy, comprising the romantic comedy film Strictly Ballroom, the romantic tragedies William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and Moulin Rouge.
That's considered a trilogy. Interesting.
Following the trilogy, projects included Australia, The Great Gatsby, Elvis, and the television period drama The Get Down for Netflix. Additional projects include stage productions of Giacomo Puccini's La Boheme for both Opera Australia and Broadway, and Strictly Ballroom the Musical. In September 2025, his first documentary, Epic, Elvis Presley in Concert, premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. Luhrmann is known for his Grammy Award-nominated soundtracks for Moulin Rouge and for The Great Gatsby, as well as his record label, House of Iona. Serving as producer on all his musical soundtracks, he also holds writing credits on many of the individual tracks. His album, Something for Everybody, features music from many of his films and also includes his hit, Everybody's Free to Wear Sunscreen.
Okay, so this guy is heavily involved in the actual creation of the music for
producing,
his
yeah, it sounds like.
Interesting.
So Baz Luhrmann was born in Sydney. He was raised in Herons Creek, a tiny rural settlement in mid-northern New South Wales. Luhrmann received the nickname Baz at school, given to him because of his hairstyle, the name coming from the puppet character Basil Brush, which is like, it's very like spiky, brush-like.
Okay. Is this like a Sesame Street? Like, what is that from?
Basil Brush is a fictional fox best known for his appearance on daytime British children's television.
Okay, so there's a reason I'm not familiar. Okay.
Yeah. While still in high school, Luhrmann changed his name by deed poll to Bozmark, joining his nickname and birth name together. That's where Boz was his nickname, Mark was his first name, so that's where Bozmark comes from.
Okay, that's cool.
In 1983, he enrolled in an acting course at the National Institute of Dramatic Art. He graduated in 1985. After theatrical successes, including the short play Strictly Ballroom, which premiered at the Wharf Theatre, he moved into film. He made his directorial debut with the film version of Strictly Ballroom. Luhrmann's modern film interpretation Romeo and Juliet defeated Titanic at the BAFTAs for Best Direction, Music, and Screenplay.
That's wild.
Insane, right? And they're both Leo projects.
Yeah. Wait, it defeated it for which categories?
Best Direction, Music, and Screenplay.
Ooh. Maybe. Yeah, that's tough. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like Titanic gets some unfair hate. It's a pretty good freaking movie if you ever rewatch it.
Great movie.
And it's really well directed. Was insane production to pull that off by James Cameron. So that's an interesting one. But it's just the BAFTAs. Sure. Who knows? Yeah.
The film was celebrated at Berlin Film Festival, where it was recognized with the Golden Bear Award for direction and Silver Bear for DiCaprio's performance. Luhrmann also produced both volumes of the soundtrack album, which went triple platinum.
Interesting. Can we talk a moment about DiCaprio's performance?
Sure, yeah.
How did you feel about it?
I felt like he was a raw actor early in his career who had enough aura around him, as the kids say these days, to sell me on the character.
He was aura farming.
I felt like there were some areas where he was delivering the lines that felt a little hokey, because it's a hard thing. I mean, some of the greatest actors in the world have to deliver Shakespearean lines and struggle with it. And so like to have this young guy doing it, I think for the most part it worked for me. I think that he totally visually fits the part, and like it's hard to not fall head over heels for him. But I thought he was pretty good.
Pretty good, I think, is I agree with that. There were moments, I think, of where he was expressing like extreme grief, and he was like when he was like lamenting what happened to with Mercutio later, that I thought he was definitely getting into like kind of wailing territory. It was getting a bit more grating than it was moving. And I'm like, I don't think he wants this to be grating. I think he wants this to be moving. And at least for me now, I remember, I don't know, it just didn't really, the extreme emotions weren't working as well for me. And I think those are really hard. Extreme emotions are kind of, I think at some point you sent me like a TikTok about this, about how a lot of like great acting, compilations. Do you remember this TikTok you sent me?
Yeah,
it's like a bunch of people screaming and stuff, and like there is some truth to that, right? It's like big emotions tend to be the ones that make the highlight reels.
Well, and that one's specifically funny because the reason why I loved it and sent it to a bunch of people was like it was like every greatest acting compilation of all time, and then it's just like men screaming, like, I've abandoned my boy, and all this stuff. Which I admittedly love Daniel Day-Lewis in that film,
but it made me think about it critically because I was like, why are those moments actually really good? And yet when you see, these kind of, you can kind of laugh at it. And I think it's because those are so hard to do in a way that is affecting and not get into like comedy and get into like it being kind of grating or annoying or like not sell you on the authenticity of the moment. Whereas really great performances, those huge emotions really sell you that they are authentic and evoke, the kind of similar feelings in you, right? And there's a real art to that. I think DiCaprio has developed over time because I can't remember what other episodes I've mentioned this, but like early on, I was a DiCaprio hater, man. This was an era where I was like, I don't think this guy's very good. I don't get why everybody loves him so much. I get that he's like, pretty and everybody likes that about him. But I remember, he was one of the things that made me not like Titanic as much when I was young. Even though I liked the movie overall, like he was not what I liked about it. And it was only later that I came around on him and started really admiring him as an actor. And I think that's just because he got better over time. Because going back and seeing this, I'm like, I see kind of the stuff that I thought early on where I was like, I don't know how good this guy is. Later in his career, I think he's fantastic now. I know he gets some shit still. I think some people still really don't like him, but and I'm not talking about like, potentially his propensity for dating young supermodels is well noted, but
he's a party boy too. And that ties into some of what I'm going to talk about with this film here.
Talking about purely the art and the craft, I think he is incredible nowadays, in my opinion. I really, really like what he does. But
I don't think it's controversial to say that Leonardo DiCaprio is one of the better actors working right now. Yeah,
hasn't he still like never won an Oscar or something too though?
No,
like,
he won for The Revenant eventually.
Won for The Revenant. Okay.
Yeah.
Because there was like a while where he was like a famous snub. He kept getting nominated and not winning.
He's a top 3 favorite, I think, right now to win for One Battle After Another as well. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out.
He was good in that, and that's another movie where I felt like he was. I don't know, like he's pretty transformed in that movie. But
this film, because of the fact that it's like a theater play being filmed and like walking the line of like performances on stage versus performances in a film, how each actor was approaching that, I feel like I give a little leeway.
That's a great point about how difficult this is for a young actor to pull off.
Yeah. And I think I give a little bit of leeway for a lot of it because one, the film is trying to be camp.
Yeah.
Also the staginess of it, the stage like acting that they may be going for rather than more of like your traditional film acting. So I don't know. It's an interesting one to try to analyze.
And some of that, it's so hard because I don't want to like give actors all the credit when it looks great and then like blame it on directors when it doesn't work out. But like somewhere in there's a bunch of takes of these moments and there's someone making the decision on which one to use, and we're not getting to see all the takes, and I don't know if I would agree with which one get chosen. You know what I mean? Like maybe Baz Luhrmann was attracted to some of these takes that to me were a little more grating and unconvincing. There's no way we'll ever know, but anyway, I think he was fine. But I think one of the clearest examples of what you're talking about, do you know how to say this guy's name? It's like Pete Postlethwaite, the guy who plays Father Lawrence. This is a very familiar face if you've ever seen him in anything.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a guy who just screamed Shakespearean actor to me. And as he's delivering these lines, I'm like, this guy has like done a lot of Shakespeare in his time. Like he knows this like cadence, he knows how to deliver it. That really shows the difference, like you were saying. I think even some of the like parents, the older characters, like some of the actors you can tell have been doing Shakespeare throughout their careers and really know how to do it. And it's some of the younger actors that would struggle at times more than others. But that kind of makes sense.
I think so too, yeah. So Luhrmann also had the Academy Award-winning musical Moulin Rouge, praised as having reinvented the modern musical, blending decades of popular music and remixes and mashups. The film was named one of the AFI's top 10 films of 2001, and the film also gave birth to a successful soundtrack album produced by Luhrmann, which sold more than 7 million copies and went double platinum, led by the Grammy-winning #1 hit single, Lady Marmalade.
Yeah, Lady Marmalade. That was a huge song when I was growing up, man.
Huge.
Massive.
And he produced that for his film.
Wow.
Which is insane to think about. You know, most people I don't even think connect that anymore.
Yeah, that was like all the like biggest, like hottest pop stars of that era all together in one soundtrack, being risque, and it exploded on MTV. It was like everywhere. Every day you turned on the MTV, they would be playing that thing for at least a year. It felt like.
So Luhrmann then followed up with the historical epic Australia. The film blended a nostalgic romance with major events from Australian history, including the bombing of Darwin and the true story of stolen generations, wherein thousands of mixed-race Aboriginal children were stolen from their families by the state and forcibly integrated into white society. While achieving modest box office success in the United States, was very successful in Europe, maintaining the #1 slot at the box office.
I don't think I ever heard of that.
For many weeks. Yeah, that's a film of his that I haven't seen, but after reading that, I really would like to watch that.
That feels like quite different than the rest of these.
Especially because it seems close to home, obviously, being
seems like one that he probably really cared about.
And then in 2013, he adapted F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel, The Great Gatsby. This was shot in 3D.
That was a big deal. I never saw it, but I remember that being a big deal.
Yeah, it's super Baz Luhrmann. Like, everything about it, the way that the soundtrack was integrated, the way that the film was shot. This gets into some of what else Baz Luhrmann has in his tool belt. For the film, Luhrmann and the costume/production designer Catherine Martin collaborated with Prada, Brooks Brothers, and Tiffany & Co. to create period-inspired dresses, suits, and jewelry based on their own archives, and true to the date, the book's own references to luxury brands. It was Luhrmann's highest-grossing film to date. Soundtrack was produced by Luhrmann, Anton Monstead, and Jay-Z. They sought to blend the music of the jazz age with contemporary hip-hop as two historical analogs. The album marked the biggest digital sales week for a soundtrack in Billboard history at the time and peaked at #2 on the US Billboard 200 chart.
Wow.
This is like really trying to emphasize the music and like how large his impact. Every time he drops a film, it's like these event films that are just like so intentionally crafted.
It's so interesting doing this podcast and learning about connected films because like I didn't know that Moulin Rouge, this movie, Great Gatsby, and like Elvis, like I didn't know all these movies were the same director and like I'm connected in that way, but like once I hear that, I'm like, of course, like it kind of makes sense. There's a certain shared DNA, and I haven't even seen some of these movies, but just like having seen the trailers, I can like recognize, oh yeah, that's the same director. That's so funny.
And so for Luhrmann's most recent project, technically Elvis, or at least feature project, this was a biopic about Elvis that was a big box office hit and received 8 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Butler.
I thought it was more divisive than that for some reason. Maybe it's just the circles I run in or something, but
it's divisive for me. So
okay, I feel like I heard more mixed reactions to that than this.
You know, I think to be nominated for something like that has to do with like so many different variables, like what else is in the field and what else is, you know, how hard is it being pushed to the voters and some of these other things. So that is another story for another time. Yeah. But still a film that had an impact. So that's definitely worth talking about. In 2024, it was reported that his next narrative will be this Joan of Arc film called Jeanne d'Arc.
Wow.
The project was described as the ultimate teenage girl coming-of-age story set in the 100 Years' War.
Yeah, I'm like wondering what flavor of movie are we going to get here? Are we going to get a more serious take on this, or is this going to be the full, you know, kind of gonzo version of this? Yeah. I'm excited to see what this shapes up as, for sure.
So he also recently did a large-scale documentary which took long-lost footage of Elvis in concert and blended it all together and he actually worked with Peter Jackson's studio to restore some of this like archival footage and to bring the story together. So that's cool. That came out in 2025, and that's a documentary. So he was very much in that Elvis headspace for a few years there.
Nice.
And he's now moving on to Joan of Arc. He's also worked in spaces, I kind of hinted at this, fashion, music videos, theater, very clearly music. He had this show called The Get Down for Netflix that he worked on. He collaborated with Nas, Grandmaster Flash, Curtis Blow, and DJ Kool Herc as producers to help tell the story of the rise of hip-hop, punk, and disco during shifting cultural and political transformation, using his unique brand of magical realism. Sounds very much in his style, and it's cool that he continues to champion like music and those stories. But yeah, just generally the Renaissance man, kind of involved in so many different, he's been like a judge on Dancing with the Stars. He's works closely with Metropolitan Museum of Arts. He chaired the Met Gala there. Like, so he's very involved in a lot of different aspects of
There was a real
art.
visual flair to this movie, and the costuming, the party sequence was really, really, striking, and just how everything looked, which I'm sure we'll get to once we move into the plot. But yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, he has a real eye for fashion and for the look of things. And you combo that with ear for music and a mind for direction. That's a powerful combo.
So a few other things just about the development of the film.
Okay.
Natalie Portman was cast as Juliet.
Whoa.
And during rehearsals, it was thought she looked too young for the part.
Interesting. I wonder if she actually was, or it sounds like
she was. She was too young.
She was too young, or she just looked too
Luhrmann stated that Portman was too young at the time and made DiCaprio look older than intended. He was 21 at the time of filming, and Portman was 14.
Oh, wow. Yeah, okay, that's too much.
Yeah.
That's creepy. So this is like Leon the Professional era Portman, which I guess makes sense. That would have been mid-90s. Okay, so yeah, because I think I did see somewhere that Claire Danes was like 17.
I think so.
At time of filming.
So, and that was something that came up that Baz Luhrmann talked a lot about. DiCaprio being the party boy that he was, and he was in his party boy era.
I mean, he's still in his party boy era.
Sure. But like at this time, he like, from what I understand, like flew a bunch of his friends down for like the whole production. They were in like Mexico City. And just like debauchery, they're going out to clubs and bars and like all these stories. All this stuff's
that
happening.
Time when in your life where you're like.
Meanwhile, Claire Danes is 17, was a minor on the film, so like she had to work minor hours, like as far as an actor, so she could only work a certain number of hours in a row before a break and then back, and like, that can be difficult to work around. But then you just think about like, there's been a lot of information and stuff talked about with like their relationship, Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Really? I don't know any of this. So this is
if there was a romance possibly there, and then like, because there's conflicting reports about like they really liked each other, or there's also things that say that like they hated each other, that they clashed. I just watched a video with Claire Danes this year talking about her, her time on this film, and just saying that like she loved Leo, she thought Leo was an incredible actor and all this other stuff. But of course, like I say, I think they were just on different paths in their life at this time. But I mean, ultimately what we see on screen, I think there's a fair amund of chemistry there.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely there is. Yeah.
You can buy into it. So the professionalism, at least, like, I don't know, professionalism is interesting because again, from what I understand, DiCaprio was a bit of a nuisance. He could be like playing pranks on crew members and just being like a younger guy, just kind of being an asshole.
Yeah. On top of the world at that point in his life too.
Self-centered in a lot of ways. There's also like a lot of good stories. There's stories of like all the different actors like just getting to like bond in this experience. But they say like the energy in Mexico City was so much like the film. Like a lot of that what you see is like it's there, and like there's the partying, the I'm sure the drinking and things that people don't want to talk about beyond that, and drugs and all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah.
The actor who played Mercutio, Harold Perrineau, was a little bit older than Leo was, and he talked about like them going out and partying and all this other stuff, and he was just talking about how Leo would be like messing around one moment, and then he would just turn it on as soon as they were going to start rolling cameras, and he would like nail it, and he was just like, this guy's a future movie star, he's got everything, he's got the charisma, the look, all of it, and said that like he could tell even then that like this guy was going to just shoot to the moon.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the middle there's a story. There's stories that we aren't necessarily privy to, but it sounds like a wild production. One other behind the scenes story I heard, the kind of stuff that was going on, like there is a story that I heard from two different sources that their makeup artist was kidnapped in Mexico City, held for ransom, and they paid the ransom. The production paid the ransom to get this person back, $400. It's crazy. Like, and that's just a story that they tell, and they're like, it was crazy. They got like kind of beat up, and we ransomed them back, and that's just like, again, like there's insane stuff happening. The location works are so good.
How familiar are you with like Tony Scott's films? That kind of look. Like that was kind of what I was thinking of. Like I feel like he has a certain style. He does a lot of sun bleached kind of films, and usually very different tone than this, but. I don't know, visually that's where my mind goes, kind of connecting it. He does like a scene setup stuff too, where like they're going to a location and you'll just see like some people on the side of the road having a weird interaction, and then you'll see a sign, and then they'll kind of like the images will like fade over each other or whatever that's called, where like you kind of like
transition, matching transition.
Yeah, yeah. Or it's like you see both images at the same time.
Just a dissolve, yeah.
Yeah, but a very noticeable one. Like it's a very stylized thing, and some of that style was reminding me of him. I don't know.
Yeah, cool. So this was an international co-production involving principal photography in the U.S., Mexico, Australia, Canada, quite a few places. Wow. All the development though was done in Australia, with pre-production in Australia and Canada. There was like a proof of concept basically that was put together by Baz Luhrmann, and he was like looking for Romeo. He was like, who's going to be my Romeo? And he was like, I guess going through a magazine or something, and saw DiCaprio and pointed him out, and he's like, Romeo needs to look like this. And they were like, well, actually that's an actor and he's an upcoming actor. Have you seen What's Eating Gilbert Grape? And he's like, no, I haven't. So then we watched it, and that was his introduction.
Yeah.
Then he likes to do workshop on character rather than like people auditioning. So he kind of like picks people and then like works with them to get the character to where they need to be. Though I did also hear that there was a lot of auditioning. Harold Perrineau said that like everyone was trying to get the role of Mercutio in Hollywood. He was kind of surprised that he got it, and he wasn't necessarily like a typical Shakespearean actor. A lot of these people were coming out of Juilliard. They've done Shakespeare a lot, but he had an edge of like Brooklyn in his voice, and some things that like worked against him in typical Shakespeare roles. But Baz Luhrmann saw something that he liked and cast him.
What about Johnny Legs, man? Hollywood legend Johnny Leguizamo. Interesting performance as Tybalt, and very unusual for him. I mean, I don't know. He's more of a comedic actor, I think it's safe to say, about Leguizamo. And there's some comedic element to this role, but like he's a very striking Tybalt, and kind of an intimidating presence, and his introduction is quite memorable at the gas station, right? And
that scene is insane. We'll get to that in a second. So this is what Luhrmann had to say about his look at this film. Our philosophy has always been that we think up what we need in our life, choose something creative that will make that life fulfilling, and then follow that road. With Romeo and Juliet, what I wanted to do was to look at it in a way which Shakespeare might make a movie of one of his plays if he directed it. How would he make it? We don't know a lot about Shakespeare, but we do know he would make a movie. He was a player. We know about the Elizabethan stage and that he was playing for 3,000 drunk punters, from the street sweeper to the Queen of England, and his competition was bear baiting and prostitution. So he was a relentless entertainer and a user of incredible devices and theatrical tricks to ultimately create something of meaning and convey a story. That's what we wanted to do.
I didn't even mention that, but that reminds me of something I read last week about how there was a bear. I don't feel they had him fight, or they just had him perform in some way or something, and it was like across the street from the theater where he regularly performed. So when they're saying bear baiting, that's what they're talking about. There was actually like a bear across the street that people would come see, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're seeing this bear? Come check out our play while you're at it."
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'd go see the bear once in a while just to switch it up. So we did talk some about his musical prowess, but I wanted to talk specifically about this album and some of the music that was imbued into it, because it's so of the era, so of a bunch of music that I like to listen to, at least a lot of artists that I'm recognized and familiar with.
Okay.
The first soundtrack album, so there's two of them, to accompany the film was released on the Capitol Records label. It features songs by a number of artists, including Garbage, Butthole Surfers, and Radiohead. Their song Talk Show Host, a B-side that originally appeared on the Street Spirit single.
How many of these songs are in the movie, though? Are they it's just like
quite a few. Yeah.
Interesting. I don't remember. Okay. I thought there was like a big, what was it, Prince or somebody moment?
Yeah, When Doves Cry by Prince. Yeah.
That was like one of the more memorable moments. I guess they were like singing a song when they got in the car at one point, and I wasn't sure who made that.
The soundtrack was a popular and solid seller, reaching number 2 on the Billboard Top 200 albums chart and went triple platinum sales in the US. It was especially successful in Australia, where it was the second highest selling album in 1997, going 5 times platinum. A number of hit singles also resulted from the soundtrack, including Love Fool by the Cardigans, the love theme Kissing You by Desiree, and a cover of Young Hearts Run Free by Kim Mazel, which that would be one you would probably recognize as well. That was one they were singing.
Okay.
The soundtrack was later followed by a sequel, which was just called William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Music from the Motion Picture Volume 2, which featured the film's orchestral score, dialogue from the film, and the songs not featured on the previous album. The score fuses bombastic choral sequences, produced by the Metro Voices, as well as flamboyant orchestral pieces by the London Session Orchestra. It also contains Hooper's favorite trip-hop sequences, especially seen in the track Introduction to Romeo.
Is that when he gets high and goes to the party? There was like some interesting music.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'm not sure if that was when he was introduced or if it was when he was like sad on the beach when he was introduced.
Yeah, I don't know.
Dialogue from the film was also inserted into several of the tracks. Justin Warfield of 1 Inch Punch, as well as the Butthole Surfers and Mundy, also contribute vocals to the score.
Wow.
A cover of Prince's When Doves Cry by Quindon Tarver features on the album. It became a hit for him in Australia in 1997. And having these musicians come on and score, and that's become more of a trend as time has gone on, where like these big musicians like, Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails is an example of like somebody who, has now scoring these massive films, Fincher films, incredible. And Disney film, Pixar films. So it's cool to see somebody like that branch over, but this is, some of the beginning of that maybe, or maybe it had been done previously.
That's cool. And
it's cool to see it in such a major way.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about the score in this movie. Or maybe not even the score, but like the in-world music. Diegetic music, maybe. These were some of the moments that they didn't completely break the spell of the movie, but they kind of did. It was close, and I'm still kind of divided on them, because part of the magic of this movie was how every character and everything they utter is completely in universe and in keeping with the Shakespearean language. And then when you had characters singing these songs, or characters singing along the songs, or even quoting lyrics at one point, it just stood out so much. And I can see the thinking that like the sort of lyrical nature of literal song lyrics would maybe be somewhat in keeping with how iambic pentameter, famously in Romeo and Juliet kind of feels and sounds. But it was pretty dang different, and it almost felt like this is like pieces from another universe or another world. And I don't know how much I liked it. Do you remember having any reactions to that? I
think it has differing levels of success. Obviously, we talked about like why he did this. Like Luhrmann wanted to have popular music of the era as Shakespeare had popular music of his era, like combined in. But I also heard Luhrmann talk about how he wanted this film to be timeless. He wanted like there was like an early draft where like Mercutio had like a Walkman or something, because but he was like, I don't want technology. I don't want to see rollerbladers around and stuff and all these things that are like kind of trendy or technology of the time period. I know, yeah. And cars and some of that stuff. So that was like an intention of his, but then also including the modern music does kind of date it. But for me now, it's been almost 30 years since this film came out, and I think of it and I'm like, it's kind of a time capsule of the era for me, which I appreciate. Sure,
but like, okay, so but like the moment that you start hearing Prince come in,
I'm just a Prince fan though. That's the problem.
Was it jarring to you though? Was it like, I don't know? Because to me it was kind of jarring. It was like, this isn't the language I'm expecting in this movie right now. I don't know.
I liked that because it was like choral renditions, something like about like the biblical imagery throughout, and like having like people singing it in that way kind of helped.
Sure. All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you're ready, we should probably dive into the plot. But before we do, I wanted to point people towards our Patreon. We're trying to do that a little earlier in episodes now to make sure you all are aware that we do have a Patreon, and on there we put out bonus episodes every month. We also have the ability to vote on projects like the one you're listening to now. So if you want to have that option to influence what we do going forward on the podcast, we'd love to have your support over on Patreon, and that's patreon.com/inktofilm.
So getting into the plot here. In Verona Beach, the Capulets and Montagues are two rival business empires. A shootout occurs between Montague Benvolio, Romeo's cousin, and Capulet Tybalt, Juliet's cousin, creating chaos in the city. The chief of police, Captain Prince, arrests Benvolio and Tybalt before reprimanding the families, warning them that if such an event occurs again, their lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace. Benvolio and Romeo learn of a Capulet party that evening, which they decide to crash. They meet their friend Mercutio, who has tickets to the party, and Romeo takes ecstasy as they proceed to the Capulet mansion. The effects of the drug and the party overwhelm Romeo, who goes to the restroom. There he sees and meets Juliet, and the two instantly fall in love, both unaware of who the other is. Tybalt spots Romeo and vows to kill him for trespassing into the family's home. After Romeo leaves the party, he and Juliet each learn that they belong to the feuding families, but he returns to propose to her. She tells him that if he sends word by the following day, they will be betrothed. The next day, Romeo asks Father Lawrence to marry them, and he agrees. Romeo passes the word on via Juliet's nurse, and they soon get married.
We haven't mentioned Paul Rudd yet. He's in this movie.
I know.
Surprise, Paul Rudd. I was like, wait, what?
I did not know he was in this movie.
He plays Paris. There were some interesting decisions made, I was noticing, like having him be in an astronaut costume, like a spaceman outfit at the party. It was jarring. It felt like he was at a different party.
Everything else was all keeping with like Cleopatra or like something that was like historic.
Yeah, medieval or biblical or something. And then he's just in a spacesuit.
Yeah.
And then the way he dances with her is so awkward. He's like doing moves that do not go with the music that you're hearing. And I thought it was kind of a clever way to just make everything about him, even though he's like kind of charming looking and he seems to say fine things, but just like something about him is just like grating. And it's like, this just does not fit in this world. It doesn't fit with the vibe. His vibe is all
Something's
wrong.
Off.
Something's just off. Yeah. It was a clever way to do that without having him just be like an asshole or something. They didn't have to do that. He just ended up being kind of like, this guy's just wrong for her. I wanted to mention also the very, I think, obvious metaphor of a role and symbol that water plays in this movie. And the first time we meet Juliet, she's, got her face immersed in water. It's the first time we ever see her. Yeah. And to me,
first of all, just visually super cool looking shots too. These underwater shots are so cool.
And she looks kind of dead. And I think that was a little bit of a foreshadowing, but also it establishes the role that water is going to continue to play, where it is very linked to death. It is very evocative of like a faded tragedy throughout. And like, I once I kind of highlighted that early, I just kept seeing it coming out again and again and again. I started to get to the point where I was like, maybe this is a little heavy-handed now. Maybe we're doing it too much. But like, again, if you're appealing to a teenage audience, maybe it's okay. But like them seeing each other through the fish tank for the very first time, they're seeing each other through water. It again starts to cement this idea of the water, and then of course the role that the pool ends up playing in the courtship and the initial courtship, and falling in the pool, swimming in the pool. They are literally dancing with death and like swimming through death as they're courting each other, and again very evocative. And the number of times you see Romeo underwater, we see both of them underwater, and I don't know, whenever I see that it looks like a character who is like floating there dead. And that would continue to come up time and again. I
like thinking of it also as like a barrier, like a veil that they are crossing between. Like there's a distance that's being created by that like change in air to water kind of thing. That like whether it's when they're meeting, which again super iconic. The way that they shot that aquarium sequence. Have you ever been in that situation where like there's bathrooms that like butt up against each other, and just the area where you wash your hands does see directly into the other side?
I mean, there's some really cool bathrooms, if you can say cool bathrooms, in Portland. Like I'm thinking of, there's one, this Mox Gaming, where the like sinks and stuff is actually all shared. So that's cool. But never like this, where there's like a window essentially into the other one. Like
I've been at ones where you could like reach your arm through if you wanted to, and like you could touch hands like to somebody on the other side. Weird. And it's just the part with the sinks, like not the bathroom area.
I mean, I don't have anything against it. It's kind of a fun design, I guess. It
is kind of fun. I think it's cool, especially doing it with the fish tank here. It's like such a cool introduction for the characters, or for them to meet each other in this way. Just that the kind of curious peeking through the coral and everything, like all that was really fun. And
there's like a fun effect where
Romeo
it seems
kind of
like
puts his face up against it.
Yeah, it seems like they're almost being magnified, so it's like bringing them closer than they even really are. And if you're exploring the metaphor that way, and like death is like something about the threat of death or something is like bringing them closer together. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it honestly, like you said, this was kind of made to be a film that would cater to a younger demographic, and I think in that way it's effective. Like this kind of like visual language of putting in the effort to have these motifs, I think are pretty cool. Another scene that we have to talk about more is this like Sergio Leone Western style showdown at the gas station at the very beginning. The Montagues that roll up are so lame. They're very like bro-ish, and one of them's like bumbling crumbling, and then the Capulets show up, and they're like very capable. And not that Mercutio is a Montague, but that he's like kind of part of their posse as well. But he's like seems like the only more capable person on that side.
I don't know, Benvolio seems like he could be a little bit. I mean, he's not as
not Tybalt's kind.
No, you're
like
right.
Tybalt when he shows up.
Tybalt shows up and he's kind of the alpha of that situation, if you want to use that terminology.
The actions that are so like over the top, like to put like the sight on the pistol and then to raise it up, and to have all the guns be named like rapier, dagger, sword, like all these different things.
There's
like,
art. I think there's like the Virgin Mary's on his or something, and he's got the like steel heeled shoes that like click as he walks, and he's so stylized.
Yeah, I also couldn't help but notice there is sort of like a southwestern like Latin American side to the Capulets there with like
made me think a little bit of West Side Story, which is that like Romeo and Juliet interpretation, but the more Latin American version. And like I don't know if maybe that was an influence or not, but definitely seemed present. They're setting it in like something that seems almost like a Mexico City, so right. Maybe that was a deliberate choice. I don't know.
Or like a Southern California feel, like either way, like that all feel, and that would be in keeping with like Latin American groups. The Montagues are kind of like Italian-ish. Like you could see some of like the mafia kind of things that they're drawing on here.
Yeah, you're touching on familiarity in the audience. Like you kind of recognize they're gangs, right? And so kind of one's kind of mafia, one's kind of cartel or something.
Just to talk about the guns a little more, they are used so ridiculously. Yeah. There's time they're just firing guns into the air often. They're firing guns all over the place.
Pointing them at each other, putting them to each other's heads.
Yeah, I don't know. It's done with like a laissez-faire kind of thing going on where it's like, oh yeah, it's fine. It's like, this is just normal to us. And I couldn't help but think like this was the way of because like visually, if you have a bunch of people running around with swords in like Shakespearean England, you get like they can flourish the swords and they can do other things.
Was trying
with
to treat it like a rapier or something.
With a gun, it's just like you're holding it and you're pulling a trigger, and there's not a lot of like motion to it. But instead, they're adding so much motion to these weapons, and they're flipping them around and they're putting them into the slings and everything. And
get me my long sword, and then it like shows it's just like a big gun that has the word long sword written on it. Or like Long Sword Incorporated or something, like that's the name of the company that made it or something.
It was funny to just see characters like running around with guns and kind of like flourishing them as if they were
It's funny.
swords.
It does make me feel like this is a pre-Columbine film.
Yeah, it definitely feels a bit naive, obviously, like in today's day and age.
You can get it's like we're having a little more fun with guns than maybe we should have, and children shooting each other. But, the 90s were a weird time.
So how about Romeo taking X?
Yeah, how about that, man? That was so funny, like interpreting these lines and the way they do. It's funny how you can do that with Shakespeare, right? Where you can introduce some elements to a scene, and it almost recontextualizes what they're talking about.
Especially based on emphasis. Like often the actors will like emphasize certain parts of the line to like, and then be doing something in the scene that gives you the context for what they're saying in this version.
It was a cool moment. It introduced like some surrealism to his travel to the party. It transpires very quickly, and then all of a sudden he's like in the bathroom, like within moments. But it kind of also explains a little bit of like his boldness of going there. Like it's like a drug trip. He's just kind of like doing whatever, because it is definitely kind of a risky thing to do, and for him. But it all worked for me, and I was pretty good with all of that.
Again, I got to talk about Mercutio, like just the introduction, coming up in the convertible, being in drag with the
doing like songs at the party too, like, and
pulling the tickets out of the dress.
He's technically not a Montague at least, though, so that like, he can be like maybe a little more bombastic and like he maybe he's not as hated, even though he is like an ally of theirs.
This is such a fun interpretation of this character that I never would have seen coming. Like I just think that like that's all Baz Luhrmann right there. Like that's cool to see. So the next section, Tybalt encounters the Montagues and Mercutio at the beach. Romeo then comes and attempts to make peace, but Tybalt assaults him. Mercutio intervenes and batters Tybalt and is about to kill him when Romeo stops him. Tybalt takes the opportunity to fatally wound Mercutio, who curses both houses before dying. Enraged, Romeo chases after the fleeing Tybalt and shoots him dead, avenging Mercutio's death. Captain Prince banishes Romeo from the city, so he goes into hiding with Father Lawrence. The nurse arrives and tells him that Juliet is waiting for him. Romeo climbs Juliet's balcony and they consummate their marriage, with him departing the next morning. Meanwhile, Juliet's father decides she will marry Dave Paris, the governor's son. The next morning, Gloria informs Juliet that she is to marry Paris at St. Peter's Church. When Juliet refuses, her father threatens to disown her if she doesn't accept. She runs away and seeks out Father Lawrence, imploring him to help her, while threatening to commit suicide. He gives her a potion that will let her fake her own death, after which she will be placed within the Capulet vault to awaken 24 hours later.
So this section starts off with another connection to that water metaphor / symbol that I mentioned before, and that's Mercutio standing in the ocean, shooting his gun at the water.
Yeah. It feels like Always Sunny, and when Frank comes in and he's like, anyway, I started blasting. And he's just shooting his pistols all over the place, like just being ridiculous about it. Like, why is he, again?
He's identified that water represents death, and he's like, fuck you, death, and death is coming for us, and I'm going to fight against it. But, the storm starts brewing. Very hokey looking weather effects, by the way.
Oh, well, let me tell you. The scene where he actually is dead on the ground and Romeo is holding him in his arms, and then he gets up and runs to his convertible and drives away. That shot was actually shot at the very front edge, like the front band of a hurricane that was about to hit.
That was one of the only moments, because there was a couple moments where the wind was convincing, even though it looked like they were doing some stuff to darken the scene. But the wind I saw blowing all the trees, I'm like, that looks real.
So they either got big fans to do that, or what actually happened
real big fans.
It was actually weather. So they pushed it that day until the very last minute, and they built all that stuff, which would just to say that archway that's kind of like, it's kind of like under construction.
Yeah.
But it looks like a stage.
It looks like a stage. It is definitely evoking a Shakespearean stage. Yeah.
Yeah, which is cool, and like the frame within that frame, and how this is like the dramatic scene of him, like this is the turning point of the entire story.
Where Mercutio has been wounded, and he's walking along and talking, kind of giving a performance. Yeah,
I think it's cool that it's like stage, or it's framed in the stage. It's just kind of a neat thing. But anyway, they built all of that, and apparently they shot that scene, and they ran away. They all ran away and got all the gear out of there and everything like that. Finished, wrapped for the day, and then the hurricane hit and just like destroyed all of that set. And they had to like pick up the close-ups and stuff later at a different location and try to like fit it all together and like a puzzle.
Wow.
To get that to work later. But yeah, so they were like, right at the edge of a hurricane right there. So I guess they probably like just needed to like narratively build the idea of a storm at the beginning of the scene to have that scene actually like,
I think it makes sense, honestly.
Effect.
Maybe it just worked out, but like if you have water serving the role that it serves, the idea of an approaching storm, which would contain a lot of rain, makes sense. Although I did note there's not a lot of like rain sequences that follow, so I was a little surprised. I'm like, we had this storm that was like very clearly coming, and so I thought we were going to get some dramatic rain sequences in the subsequent scenes. But instead, the storm seemed to kind of disappear. At one point, there was some lightning, as if the storm was going to maybe finally hit, but then I don't know that it ever really does. It's interesting, that was the one where I was like, maybe they weren't planning on the storm, and the storm was just kind of there, so they were trying to find ways to make it make sense. But I mean, I think overall I like the Mercutio death scene. It was an interesting choice to have the stab still be a stab, because they have Tybalt like grab glass, it seems like, and slice him with it, and then he like looks at his like down at his stomach, and he's like, I am slain, and I'm like, the cut that I just saw, like, maybe it's not going to kill you right away, and if you get some medical attention, you'll probably be all right. It looked like a nasty cut. It didn't look like a certainly fatal cut.
No, I would have thought it would be much more severe.
Yeah. So anyway, again, it's kind of staginess, and then like, I don't know. I was surprised to have it still be a cut at all when we got these characters running around with guns and pointing them at each other and constantly, and like in the play, he's stabbed with one of these rapiers. And yet here we have Tybalt's rapier, and his gun doesn't get used. Instead, it's this like broken piece of glass. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought that was surprising too.
Maybe trying to back down the amount of gun violence in the movie.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, obviously, it's a more intimate way to kill somebody. I think with a piece of glass, like it
and
feels more.
He says, "I am stabbed" or something like, or "I'm cut" or something. So there's a couple of lines where that don't make as much sense if it's like a shot. So maybe that was they were thinking like, if for this line to make sense, he's got to be stabbed by something.
I definitely was anticipating like him getting shot in the back or something.
Yeah. And then Leo goes bounding off to avenge his friend.
Which I think that does take place in the rain when he's like racing around.
Yeah,
in the
maybe.
car.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, could have been. And he flips over, and then Tybalt gets shot here, and this is definitely gun death. And R.I.P. Leguizamo. I thought he was really good as Tybalt. I think. I've heard some people saying that this is like their favorite version of Tybalt in any movie.
He brought it. I mean, just in the same way to the Mercutio, they were definitely my two favorite characters. Like they fit the role.
Now this starts introducing some of the things I noticed where it was like certain lines and moments were being omitted. There is a moment where in the play that I remember where Juliet, when she does get the poison, not the poison, sorry, she does get the medicine that's going to make her seem as if she's dead, but she's not actually dead, and she takes it. Remember, she had this moment where she was like, "Wait a minute, what if I just got poisoned? What if he lied to me?"
Yeah.
And she has like this doubt about it. That sequence was cut. So there's a couple moments where I'm starting to notice things being omitted, and it will lead up to a bigger omission here at the very end. But that was I just wanted to track that a little bit. I wasn't like meticulously going through and looking for every moment, but that's just one that I noticed when it happened.
Also, a big change that we're going to get to in a second is the way that like the letter from the father was supposed to be delivered ended up being from like post haste.
Like FedEx
post.
It's
yeah,
like
basically
the mail.
It was called like post haste post.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, which I thought was funny.
And then it was like stuck there, and he just keeps like barely missing it, and it's very happenstance that he keeps not getting the letter.
And those are some of the elements that I picked up on last week when we were talking about the original story, is like how everything is so close. Like if something had happened a little differently, like these tragic events wouldn't have cascaded like this, but instead like, everything. And I think Luhrmann chose to like lean into that even more, like the way ultimately like the deaths at the end, like that was even closer than was originally depicted, I think in the story.
The mother character is interesting. We didn't talk about her much, but Lady Capulet, she was so like, her introduction was so over the top and like comedic. She's got this like funny makeup, like she's in the process of getting makeup done or something, and then she's got this like hairnet on, and she looks kind of silly. And her and the nurse, and how they both are really played up for comedy and being kind of just over the top and kind of goofy characters. And some of that is definitely in the play, so it's like it's not that it's not there, but there's like an emphasis you can put on it. And then we see her mother kind of refuse to help her after her father like casts her down and basically says like, "You're not going to be my daughter. You're not going to live here. I'm not going to support you if you don't marry Paris."
Yeah, I thought that like the relationship with the nurse was sweet. There's that scene where she's like withholding the information about like Romeo's like response and everything like that. I thought that played really well. It felt like this.
It does seem like the nurse really does care about her, even though she is a very kind of comedic character.
But yeah, that original sequence, like just that's such a Baz Luhrmann character, like the manic energy there, like the just like of the mother's introduction.
Oh, Lady Capulet, yeah.
Like just like so much energy, so much like it's like humorous and chaotic, and like there's so much going on with that, and to lead us right into that. And then the character kind of tones down a little bit as the film goes on. Like I don't see her being like that all throughout the rest. But they also like, I don't know, this depiction, like I don't feel like they care about Juliet as much as I thought they maybe did in the original story. Maybe
the nurse does, but she's got her hands tied to it. I don't know, but you might be picking up on something, because that does lead to there's some changes at the very end, which let's go ahead and like maybe round out the plot, and we can talk about this and put a cap on it.
Yeah, so Father Lawrence vows to inform Romeo of the plot via overnight letter, whereupon the latter will sneak into the vault. Once reunited with Juliet, the two will escape to Mantua, the remote trailer park in the desert where Romeo has been hiding out. However, Romeo does not see the delivered letter, so believing Juliet to be dead, buys a vial of poison from an apothecary. Romeo enters the church where Juliet lies and consumes the poison just as Juliet wakes up. Distraught over his death, she shoots herself in the head with his gun, falling down beside his lifeless body. As the bodies of both Romeo and Juliet are being loaded onto ambulances, the parents of both houses arrive at the scene. Captain Prince approaches their fathers, berating them both for the deaths of their children that their foolish feud has caused.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the big changes. So one of the first ones that I think, it almost feels like this was just something that got cut for time. But Paris does not get killed by Romeo. That's a pretty big change.
Yeah, and why even include him if he's not going to be like the foil for the end of the story?
Well,
like
you
that,
need
you
him.
know?
You need him as this
Yeah.
like, the suitor, the threat, the thing that kind of adds a ticking clock to the story of like, oh, she's gonna end up marrying this other guy if I don't act soon. But it is like a weird dangling thread to have this character
Feels like
who
it.
has shown up multiple times just kind of disappear and not be mentioned again, and he's just gone at the end. And to me, that felt like there was some sort of death scene in there that got cut. But I don't know if that's true or not, but that was just my pet theory. But yeah, it's an interesting change. And then the other big one was at the very end, as you said in that summary. We have the prince, I guess, he's like a captain. He's like a police captain instead of the actual Prince of Verona or whatever he was. Just kind of berating them and them looking like a kind of ashamed, and then the movie ends. Versus that like, oh, maybe we've learned something, and like, what have I done? Like, I have my bridegroom is a corpse, or I forget all the lines, but there's all these lines about what kind of death you've welcomed into your house, and a lot of that gets changed, and we don't know whether or not these characters have learned anything and are going to change it all. And that actually leaves it in kind of a more depressing place where it's like, I don't know if anybody learned anything from this or if it's just tragic.
Definitely. I felt like that was the silver lining that we talked about last week with the original story, was like, we think maybe, and you mentioned like, who knows how long this kind of truce or like this understanding lasts between the families.
Yeah, fair. Yeah.
But ultimately, like, they do seem like they're like both, they understand the woes of the other.
They're like, look what our fighting has done to us. We've lost the things we hold most dear.
And in a way, no one else can really understand what they're going through but the other. So in that way, they're like trauma bonded. They're like, we have gone through this together, and we're the only ones who can really identify that. I feel like that definitely does fundamentally change it. And I don't know. I feel like I prefer the silver lining. But maybe Baz Luhrmann didn't want there to be a happy ending.
Yeah.
Like any sort of happy ending.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising at the very least. It does make it a little shorter if you're cutting the end a little bit. Maybe, I mean, the movie comes in right at 2 hours, so maybe there was like a real effort to keep it under 2 hours. I don't know. But I noticed it. And then, the whole part at the end with all the candles, I thought it was visually extremely striking to have these blue neon crosses in this church.
Totally. So I heard that this is a real location that they went to.
Really?
Like, this was already set up this way.
And it had the blue neons?
Maybe I misunderstood it, but from what I saw, Baz Luhrmann was so struck by the candles with the blue neon signs that like this was an actual location that he wanted to film there.
Really cool. It's really striking looking.
Yeah. Just the idea of going in there, and like, one, I was thinking about how hot it would be from all those candles.
Yeah, probably.
But it looks so that the blue and the orange from the candles and the neon and like the way that like the characters,
modernity and like the ancient world, which you could say this whole movie is kind of that. So maybe that's why he liked it so much.
Yeah, totally. That's a great interpretation, and I like that they're like surrounded by all of this. It feels so monumental in some way. Like this is like the star-crossed lovers, like epic fate kind of thing that we were talking about last week. Of like, this was if this is to be their end, like it felt like a fitting place for it, kind of thing.
Really tragic the way they had Romeo drinks the poison, and it's like the very moment he's drinking the poison, she's awake, and he had her like stirring and moving and stuff, and he just doesn't notice it. Like he was
really tugging at people's heartstrings.
Yeah, really amping up the idea that this was so close to not happening.
Yeah,
the way that it does.
And she's like moving her fingers and stuff, and he just like stops touching her at the perfect time, and really like plays up the tragedy of that, where you're just like, if only something could have happened differently.
It is in the line, because there's a line where he's talking about how crimson her lips are, and how like death hasn't touched you in the way because you're so beautiful or something, and like there's something there where it's like Shakespeare is playing with the like, maybe he should have noticed that she didn't quite look really dead, but he instead he kind of romanticizes why, and he's able to convince,
because death couldn't conquer her beauty.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's kind of that foolishness of youth, which we talked about. That's something we talked about a lot last week, by the way. Like true love, is this true love? Is this just lust? Like, what even is this? So we can't rehash that conversation here, but definitely check out last week if you didn't. Let's cast our votes. Book versus play here. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about this one?
It's tough. I think like there's some notable things that I prefer in Shakespeare's play, but I am going to take the movie in this case because I like so much of what Baz Luhrmann did here, and just in like defining his style and voice, and like all of these new coming actors that were like virtually unknowns that like blow up from this, and like or not necessarily from this, but they were at that point in their career where they're about to be much more famous and notable. And just I don't know, like I mentioned, maybe even if some of the acting didn't necessarily land all the way for me here or there, the swings that were taken, the fact that like the attention was specifically put on like the language and how it like, we've talked multiple times, I mean, countless times on this podcast about, we generally like hearing some of the text brought to screen. And like, this is an entire film of the text brought to screen for the most part, which is just such an interesting experiment to say the least. And also for me, like, as I said, like, I really do think of this as like a bunch of things that are just like wildly insane that just somehow weave together in this serviceable, fun, like wacky film that I found myself enjoying. And like, I'm glad that I have this more present in my mind now when I think about Baz Luhrmann and this type of filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm gonna take the play here, but I don't disagree with your general points. Like I kind of agree. Like I feel positively about this movie. I've noted that there are lots of things that didn't work for me, but overall I thought this was, a really bold, ambitious thing to try. I'm glad it exists. It's interesting to watch it now. I had a pretty good time with it, but there's something pure about that play. It's so iconic, obviously. This is the most like his most adapted piece of work, and I think there are probably other Romeo and Juliet adaptations out there that are faithful and moving and probably even better. I have not watched them all. But now we have an opening to where we could potentially watch other Romeo and Juliet adaptations. But all that's to be said. Like I like this movie plenty, but it feels like I can't put it over the play. So I'm gonna give it to the play because I that's the core, that's the basis. So I think it's fair to kind of split our votes here, though.
Yeah, definitely. You made me think of like a couple other things that I do want to note too. I like imbuing modern soundtrack into it. I think that's fun, especially for that era and that time period. I like performance wise, like I thought again, Mercutio, Tybalt, like the way that those characters were fleshed out, and so much fun, so much like emphasis put on those kinds of characters that I kind of overlooked in the original source material. Yeah. Overall, this is just like a really Baz Luhrmann film. Like,
really Baz Luhrmann film, which I know what that means now a little more. All right, so that's going to be it on our Romeo and Juliet coverage. Thank you to the patrons who voted for this. If you enjoyed it, please let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you're on YouTube, let us know in the comments, or wherever you are listening to this, if you have the ability to leave comments. Let us know how you feel about this movie. Obviously, made some changes to the original play. It's set in a modern world, which is in and of itself a big change, but like, is this a movie you saw when it came out? How do you feel about it now? I'm definitely curious to hear about people's relationship to this film, because it seems like there are a lot of very personal ones to it.
And be sure to connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film.
We also have a Discord, which we have been inviting people to. It'll be a link to it will be in the show notes. That's where you can actually comment just like general titles you want us to be aware of, and we compile them all together in a list that people can start upvoting essentially, and kind of like move stuff to the top of our awareness that then we choose from for the Patreon polls. That's one reason to join the Discord. We also have dedicated threads to every project we've covered. So that's where you can go and have a conversation about this, even if it's like months or years later. So we'd love to have you on our Discord, and like I said, a link to that will be in the show notes.
And thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's it, man. The only thing left to do is to announce our next project, which is one that has been on our radar for a long time. I have seen the trailer a couple times. I'm trying to avoid watching it too much because I don't want to get too spoiled, but it looks good. And I love Andy Weir. So we are covering Project Hail Mary next. I'm so excited to return to Andy Weir's fiction. We'll be covering the book next week and then following it up with the film, which looks like it's going to be a big one. Fingers crossed, but it really looks like it's going to be a big one to me.
It's feeling like it's gearing up to be one of the biggest of the year, and I can't wait. I mean, it's just been anxiously anticipating it. The marketing machine is in full swing right now, so everybody's, I think, hearing about it. A lot of people are going to go see it. I hope it's good, and I'm excited to finally get to read this book that I've been hearing people say for years is like one of the best audiobooks out there, so it's just like, gotta check it out.
Cool. All right, so that's going to be it for Romeo and Juliet, and all that's left to say is until next time.
Keep adapting.